Hi, and welcome to the OrgDev podcast. We're absolutely delighted to welcome Bola Ogundeji today. She is Director of People and Organisation Development at the London Legacy Development Corporation. So the London Legacy Development Corporation is the ultimate example of small teams doing great big things. So previous to that, she was Deputy Chief People Officer at the world famous Moorfields Eye Hospital in London, and she brings a wealth of different skills and experiences to her role, from workforce design to diversity inclusion to employee relations to change management and HR strategy, to name just a few. And she combines that in the roles that she does, but through an organisation development lens. Bola also has a master's in human resource management. She's a chartered fellow of the CIPD, and she's also volunteers as a counselling psychotherapist. And we'll do a little bit of exploration about how that informs her work in the organisations as well. So these conversations are all about uncovering how people do organisation development in different contexts. And when Bola agreed to actually meet us today, we're absolutely delighted. So today we're going to be really looking forward to understanding more about your role.
Welcome. It's really lovely to have you here, Bola. Thank you for joining us. So just to kick off, can you just tell us a bit about your role? What does your role involve?
Thank you, Danny, and thank you, Garin. It's good to be here. Thank you for inviting me. So I think Garin really covered it. So joined LLDC in 2023, July, as the Director of People and OD. And part of my brief really is to manage the people and OD function, and that encompasses L&D, what you would normally expect from an HR department. We have DEI focus, we have some culture focus. We've got systems and contracts. We have a big job at the moment, which is to try and steer the organization through a period of change, because LLDC is going through a transition, and that's just simply because planning powers are going back to the local boroughs. So part of my role is to help from a people perspective to support our executive management teams, the CEO, as well as my team. I have a vibrant team of HR professionals, all covering different aspects, from talent acquisition to coaching to performance management, and all, the A to Z of HR really. And
Crikey.
part of that is also we're working as part of a system. So we are in really exciting times where we're working with the wider GLA family as part of, because we're a mayoral development corporation. So we're working with our colleagues like TFL, MOPAC, and we're doing some really developmental work in that space. And I'm part of the senior team that is working together on various aspects of the HR provision. I think that's in a nutshell.
Yeah, I'm feeling
Fabulous.
tired just hearing all of that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And for those who might not know kind of the London's Legacy Development Corporation, can you just explain a little bit about what the organisation is, does, and how it came about?
Right. So people might, when they hear LLDC, they might think, what's that? But it's, if you think of the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park and the Olympic and Paralympic legacy, LLDC is the organization behind that. So we are the brains, as Garin said, a small organization doing really great things. And it's been responsible since 2012 to bring the legacy of the Olympic and Paralympic legacy to East London, and doing various things around inclusive economy, lots of great things, making sure the park, is an exciting and global destination for lots of people within the country and outside of the country. So that's what LLDC does.
Crikey. So it's like a multi-billion-pound organisation that's making social change, economic change.
Cultural change. East Bank, some people might have heard of East Bank in East London. So we've now got BBC coming on side. We've got some educational institution. UCL is now on our side. So we've got lots of Stedler Wells. I'm selling it now. If you want to come down. So there's an all cultural quarter and innovation district within the park here East. They're doing really fascinating things to make the park legacy something, to behold all over the world.
Which is, I guess the word I'm just thinking is just complexity. There's so many different, very succinct, different things doing, and obviously you've got like the velodrome and all those things as well, haven't you?
Absolutely, yes, we have that. And we've got the stadium. We've got lots of things. We've got the West Ham Stadium is on the park. We've got the what's it called? The aquatic center for those who love swimming. That's on the park as well. And lots of new homes on the park.
So we assume you have about 30,000 staff doing all of this.
Not really. A very small team with very massive influence all over the place. We're not that big at all. I think, but if you're not considering all of the links we have with other organizations, LLDC is about 200 employees in total.
Yeah.
Okay.
So small organization with big agenda, as Garin said. Yeah. So your role is your job titles combined with people and organization development. What does that look like in practice?
In practice, is making sure that we are compliant with paying people, that we're compliant with hiring people, all the different things you would expect in your transactional services, that we are making the place safe for people to work, health and safety wise from an organizational people perspective, that we are inducting people into the organization correctly, but that when they join us, it's more like the employee life cycle, making sure that from when people are hired to when they leave us, that they find it a great place to work, that we're rewarding and recognizing people when they do great work. So there's a lot of emphasis on training, but that we're also supporting the well-being of our employees as well as supporting managers to lead well and to manage well, all those things, and then making sure that people feel like they belong to our organization. We're in East London, so for us it's also important that people who work with us look like the demographics that they are surrounded by. So making sure that people can come and work for us who look like people who live there. I think that's also important for our agenda as people.
I guess we'll ask you more questions in terms of how that combines through an organization development lens in a moment. But what was your journey into this field?
I would say, perhaps I was thinking about this the other day, and I would say probably when I undertook my master's degree in HR management some 19 years ago, when we're looking at consulting, frameworks and all of that, looking at, I was trying to remember this change models, all the different change models, Lewin's 3-stage model, all of that. I think that would be my first introduction. And then as I finished that and got into business partnering roles, I started to notice that, and I was really fortunate to do interim roles for many years, which meant I went from organization to organization. What was obvious to me was that the traditional way of just transacting HR businesses was not as effective as if you looked at it from a wider perspective, looked at it from a system, looked at it from a process, looked at it from what's the structure, what does this mean? And I began to really get interested in that. I'm a curious person naturally, but that got me thinking about it, like, why are you doing, just being inquisitive and asking more questions. So if some of the people are supported, if they said, oh, we need to do this right now, we need to cut the job or TUPE people out, I was interested in, yes, and when you TUPE them over, what does that mean? They're not going to suddenly change from day one, where you've merged them with a new organization, new team, new stories, and then I began to become really curious about it. How can we make that happen in a way that's more sustainable, in a way that means that people could settle better? And that just kept getting developed. Another example was in leading employee relations, which I really enjoyed doing that. And I've had employee relations portfolio under me for many, many years. I realized that people would often come and say, oh, this team is not performing. I had an example once where a director said to me, we're failing, looking at metrics, we're not meeting our targets, there are patient risks, there are people risk. They had about, in a 600 people directorate, they had about 100 employee relation cases. And they just thought it was fine. And the previous HR team that were looking after them just kept transacting these grievances and cases, and people were just getting frustrated, sick, and then they became even sick. And then you had different strands of, not just the grievance or disciplinary, now had another cohort being sick of that cohort. It just was mayhem. And I got them to start thinking about what's the culture here, what's going on here, and by the time we, and I said to them, it's not a badge of honor to have 100 cases and you've been to employment tribunals so many times. And then when we started to delve deep, and I was like, okay, can I see are people clear on their roles and responsibilities to begin with? Do they have touch points with their managers? What's the structure like? And then you start asking these questions, you start seeing the picture emerge. Some might say, I've never seen my manager for the last 6 months. Managers being so stressed, they're doing something completely different. Or you notice people, one of the things people said to me was, yeah, there's a blame culture here. So if you get it wrong, so people are fearful. There's a very, top-down approach, commandeering. You start looking at all those things. And then I started to think, there's more to this machine. And I started looking more into it. And from then on, I just started to develop my OD thinking around a wider system-based approach to problem solving, or even to developing capability.
Wow. Sorry, there's just so many things in there, which is really interesting. I know Danny is a former HR director. Is like, oh, I can see that. But that's really interesting, because I think like the business partner model, like business partnering is tough. You've got so much to do, such a broad set of responsibilities, and you can go home at the end of the day having resolved all these employee relations issues, feeling like you've done a good day's work because the task has been completed. But there's something around what you were doing there, which is actually, yes, that's on the surface, that's the symptom, but what's happening beneath the surface, and having different types of conversations. And that it takes curiosity, but also takes courage as well, doesn't it? Because it's very easy just to serve the person that you're working with. What was it there that really drove you to have those different types of conversation, and how welcome was it?
Very good question, Garin. And actually, you mentioned something that's really dear to me, and I say that a lot and mention it to my mentees and colleagues. It's the word professional courage. Without that, you really can't do lots of these things. And initially, before I became a business partner, I think I was a HR manager, but I very quickly realized that's not the way I wanted to work, because I don't want to manage. And then I've seen that as the difference between that, a HR business partner who's curious, who's not hasty about, let's just band-aid this issue and move. Of course, it can be a long drawn process because people don't have time. They don't have we're time poor generally. We want to just move on and feel like we've done something long. Great. But I know that sustainable change takes time. And that's the way I've always supported every organization I worked with, either as a change lead, to always think beyond what you're trying to change. And you're right, professional courage. I was fortunate, I think, because in the big part of my HR business partnering days, I was working as an interim. So that helped me for people to ask me to come and work for them because they saw the value in what I could bring to their team. So that gave me a bit of, if you like, that there was a mandate there. But B, for us to contract very well about, is this what you want me to do? And if not, if it's not congruent with what I believe is right, then there's an opportunity for us to talk about it. The particular example I gave about this employee relations case, I remember joining the organization, and on day one, we had a meeting with the executives, and we had different views that were being played out. Instantly, I knew that they didn't understand what business partnering was. They thought I was there to just be the extended leg to do some of the work and just get on with it. So we went back to the drawing board to try and, re-educate about what is the business partner model, what is it as your business partner that you should expect from me. So, and once we reset and they were open to that, and we set some ground rules, we were able to work together, and we recovered all those problems. Actually, they began to think themselves about decisions they were about to make. So they didn't all then come to me with everything. They would think, what would Bola ask us? Because they know I would ask them a series of questions. And it really worked well in the end. So yeah,
it's brilliant. I love what you're saying there, because again, something that we sometimes see in organization, here to get your view, is yes, people take on interim professionals, but often there's been a lag. There's been no one there in the role previously. There's a big lot of work to be done. Interims, they're not as cheap in the short term as employees. spare pair of hands, get to work. And I guess what you're saying there is, though, let's contract, let's define what we're looking for, let's agree that we all know what good and done looks like. And then if it's still not understood, let's keep going on it before we begin. Is that are you the exception or the rule when it comes to that?
Well, where people understand it, I think, and I've worked with really fantastic business partners and directors who get it. But I think sometimes it's the challenge between managing that tension between let's get on doing what we need to do because we've got to justify. So I really get it. And then it feels like an exception because it's more like the novel thing to do. Like, yes, this is there, which is why my argument, there was a period where people felt that the public sector or NHS particularly was spending too much money on interims. And I said, that's how you get to balance this, imbalanced situation where you have people who have been there for maybe many, many years and doing the same thing. But then if you bring in something new and inject that support in, it gives some of the others the breathing space to go and develop and do more stuff. And it just helps to recalibrate things. So I think it's yes and no, if you like.
As most things in organisation development are, aren't they?
Brilliant. So we love kind of unpacking for people what roles really look like day to day. So can you tell us what we won't say a typical day, but what a typical week looks like for you?
Typical week will start with, in fact, by Sunday night for me, when I'm beginning to get into work mode and I'm thinking, what do I need to do this week? And my kids have said, Sunday is not the beginning of the week. For me, it's like the beginning of the week. We can argue that with them later. But I'll start thinking about what does my week look like so that I can be, if you like, intentional about what I'm going to do that week. But Mondays at LLDC is when we have our executive management team meetings. And usually there will be things to discuss or papers to review. So we'll spend the day with my EMT colleagues, with our CEO. And then I'm in the office Mondays to Wednesdays. We work in a hybrid way. So I mean, Mondays to Wednesdays, and then Thursday, Fridays, I'm at home. So, but those first 3 days will be meetings, will be huddles with my team, huddles with my senior team, and it might be meetings with the whole pod team, our people and OD team, trying to just meet different colleagues within the business and trying to just think of what's the forward look. We have a forward look system where we're constantly looking at what's coming up. Is it a committee? Do we have papers to write? So it's just trying to service all of that, but creating some room for, just somebody might want to come and talk to me or catch up with me. I have coffee breaks now with people in my team every quarter. So that goes round every quarter, but before you know it, it feels sometimes I'm having a coffee break with somebody or with a colleague, which is nice. It does break the day up a bit. And and then you see what emerges or unfolds during the course of the week.
The combination of the organisation development and the chief people officer role, like, are they mutually exclusive, or do they sort of like you do one but through the lens of it? How does that work? Or is it just like kind of it happen?
I think they are intertwined. Personally, I don't think you can realistically do one other than when you think about your shop front, which is to pay people and all of that. That's fine. But once you go beyond that, I don't think you can separate the two. So for example, for us, when looking at maybe transition and all the different ways we're needing to shift and change, I have to be thinking about what does that mean for us when we've evolved? We're not just going to evolve into a vacuum. What does that mean? And what does that mean for people coming to work for LLDC who have seen us as this wonderful organization behind the Olympic Park? We still need to retain that, magnanimity, if you like, or that we're doing really important work. We want to attract the best talent still. So how do we do that? Making sure that there are no invincible barriers in our system that will preclude some people from wanting to come and work for us. So it's constantly looking at that. What does it mean for our values? So our values have been there for some time. How does that need to change at all, and why? What does that mean for our strategy? Is the people strategy speaking to the overall organization's vision and long-term plan? So that it's constantly, I think they're quite intertwined. And And what does it mean for leadership? What's our approach to collective leadership, maybe as executives, but also from a middle management perspective, knowing the value that middle managers bring to the employees' engagement and people's sense of belonging at work. So yeah, I constantly see it as if you like, a nice dance between the two, and knowing when do you need to keep the thinking going. The thinking never stops for me. I think I'm always thinking it, but also doing when there's a need to.
Yeah, and I really want to pick up on that as well, because we spend a lot of time getting people to think. There's not enough thinking in the world, and the way you're articulating it really beautifully is that there's just these, particularly in a senior strategic role like yours, is that there's a lot of strategic questions we need to be thinking about. And how do you make time to do this thinking? Is it something that happens in the nature of the work, or do you designate time to think, and how do you go about doing it?
Personally, I create some time to think. I'm a reflective person by nature, so I'm always thinking. And I have to balance that with making sure that I do. So I don't have a problem with thinking at all. And I'm actually I can be task focused as well. I've got a really strong blue preference from an insight discovery perspective, but I try and balance them properly. So I create the time. And if I don't feel like I have time to think, I start to feel quite stifled, because I know that good work happens when I've created time to really, if you like, just and that's why I do a forward look and planning ahead to think through, okay, what does this doesn't mean it has to be landed completely, because it's always evolving. So it's a bit of both. Putting some margin in my diary to do that thinking, but also thinking with others as well. Just
Yeah, I was going to say, how do you encourage your wider team to make space for the forward look as well?
yeah. I'm just thinking about the team I have now is very small compared to the one we had before. But the way I encourage that is making sure we have, like I said, the coffee spaces, having no agenda, just meeting with colleagues in my team and having coffee dates with them. We do quite a bit of thinking there. We have our huddles as well, where these days I don't necessarily put it as an agenda, but I might ask one question at the end, one question for people to go and think about. We have away days. We have both the overall team, but also the senior team to just, and I do ask myself questions as well, just list some things I want to think about, just put it there and go away and do something else. Sometimes it gets answered while doing something else. So yeah, because there's
Brilliant.
not enough time to just sit there and be thinking and going, oh, I'm really thinking.
Would that be a luxury, just wistfully looking out of the window?
And because people want to see actions, right? So I think in a society and workplace where it's about what have we delivered, people are wanting to see what have we delivered. But I'm also quite interested in why have we delivered it and why are we trying to deliver it. So, but it's managing all of that, really.
Yeah, it sounds like a managing of tensions there, doesn't it? And what do you enjoy most about your role, particularly sort of the OD elements? Like, what do you get most fulfillment or satisfaction from?
I like the fact that it's versatile, that I can 1 minute be doing something really, really strategic, and then I can be doing something else and using some of my skills that I've gained while developing in my HR career to help my team think or troubleshoot. I do like that. But I enjoy mostly now thinking about the impact that we as people professionals can have on people and an organization, and the legacy of that, especially thinking about where I'm at in my career. I'm like, this is the time to really make a difference. I like the fact that I'm doing lots of mentoring. I have quite a few mentees that I'm supporting. That is really rewarding. I get to be able to bring some of that knowledge and experience to them. But I like the fact that I also use my skill as a trained therapist in service of my work. So I don't come to work trying to psychoanalyze or give therapy to people, but that in itself helps me personally to stay grounded and to regulate, because some of the things we're dealing with is really, some of them are quite emotive, sensitive, all of that. So I get to use that, but I also get to pass that to to others because of my influence that I can have as part of my role. And developing people is really an enjoyable part for me.
Yeah, and you touched on a really important thing, isn't it? Because particularly like in HR, there's so much emotion that's projected onto you, and it's often like you're just the vessel. Sometimes like you're trying to manage a process or take people from A to B and that as well. Obviously with the sort of psychotherapy background, what is the importance of like for HR people at the center of change to have that kind of supervisory space that they can make sense of things?
Yeah, if I had my way, first, let me say, I think it's hugely important. And I think it's only in recent times I started to think of the harm that can be perpetuated against HR people and that naive HR people can have on others. Not because they're intentionally trying to, which is why I've started to think, actually, when you have I've worked a lot in the NHS, doctors have to have their own supervision, psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers, they have their own supervision. And I've begun to think of the HR space. How much supervision do we give? Yes, we have one-to-ones, and which sometimes it's about the job, boom, 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 you're out. But I think it's hugely important, as you said, Garin, there's a lot of contagion that we get from supporting others, which if you don't know how to manage that or how to manage your own self-regulation, that just doesn't work. And perhaps that's what leads to some of the problems that people say, oh, I'm not feeling supported by my, HRBP or whatever. And then by the time you unpack that, the HRBP or the person has done everything by the books. There's something more that the person isn't getting. Is it that they just want someone to be with them rather than just tell them what they know? So it's only if the person really understands, as you said earlier on, Garin, about beneath the iceberg, what's there is the anxiety that's displaying itself as them and us and, anger or whatever. But only if you're attuned to your own self and what's going on in the room, which is why I love OD, because OD helps you think about group process, group dynamics, and all these other things that can help people be much more equipped to deal with what's in the room type of thing, which if somebody's coming just from a purely HR background, they might miss some of those things. Have I answered the question? Because I feel like
Well, I'm so glad I asked that. That was
Yeah,
just beautiful. I've got about 50 people I want to send that to.
Yes, yeah, I'm thinking people are going to get so much value from this conversation. It's fantastic. Thank you. So we've talked about what you enjoy most. What do you find most challenging about your role?
What do I find challenging? Most challenging. I think it's the most, maybe not most challenging, but maybe challenging sometimes when I'm feeling like I'm incongruent with what is going on. Because again, in these roles, I think one has to think about your own personal values versus, what the organization's values. And I'm not just saying that for LLDC, I'm saying that generally in my HR career, that's what I probably find challenging at times might be when we want to do something, but I'm then thinking, what does this mean for something else? And the time in between to try and win the heart and mind, and trying to get that. But again, I think that's where HR really comes in to bring that value to the business. So I see that as a space for us, which is a welcome challenge because I grow as a result of it. Other people grow as a result of it, but it can sometimes feel like, oh, why are they not getting us? But really, and then I remind myself, that's why we're HR and OD, and that's why they pay us to do this job. So come and get on with it. But otherwise, it's not an insurmountable challenge at all.
Fabulous. And then when you think about a week or a month, how do you look back and think this has been a successful week? How do you measure success?
Yeah, because I guess you've got the classic metrics, haven't you? There's certain things that HR is always measured against, like engagement, turnover.
Indeed.
Often these are lag indicators, though, aren't they? They're measuring something that's happened over weeks, months, or years previously, aren't they?
It's true. And you can have those hard data to say, yeah, we've done. But again, I know that good things don't happen like that overnight. It takes a while. So I'm always taking a longer term view about what success means or what's successful. Because otherwise you can have a quick win and think, oh yeah, that's been successful. But 3 months later, is it still? So yes, you have the data to look at, how we're doing, but looking at qualitative and quantitative data, but also leaving room for anecdotes and feedback, and in the moment, just temperature checking what's going on, because what was going on 2 weeks ago may have quickly moved on. So I think success for me is then bringing all those, extrapolating those, information and data, and taking a sense of, okay, what is this telling me? But also then using it to predict the future. So using that data as a predictive tool rather than just something that describes how we've done, how wonderful, which is great, but also using it and consolidating, okay, if this is not in the right direction, how can we consolidate that so that it helps us towards the future as well?
Yeah, and there's loads of really interesting things you're saying. There's one thread I want to pull on. Obviously, as sort of chief people officer, you're in amongst the senior leadership. Prevention is always better than cure. So the earlier that HR is involved in decisions and initiatives, and that people element is brought into it, the more important. And also that relationship with the CEO is also really critical to make sure that, at least HR is someone that they consult to, but can often have that close. What can HR do to be recognised, to be seen to be adding value? Because you take a very pragmatic approach as well, don't you?
Yeah. Again, it's only going to be as successful as your, if you like, your engagement with your stakeholders as we're not going to be given a seat in the room if people don't see the value of inviting us to the room. So I think I'm always an advocate for us making our offerings very clear. This is how I can add value to you. Taking that, I've never seen, even though as a chief people officer or director, I don't see myself less than a business partner. I just see my business partnering happening at a different scale, on a different scale, at a higher level. So I see myself partnering with my CEO, with my executive colleagues, whilst my other, heads of, or they also have people they're partnering with. I see that as an ongoing work. And part of that is ensuring I understand where they want to go. There's some key people you want to work well with as HR, because it makes the work just easier. And then once they see the value that you bring, I think then we win that argument of banging the door. They would be calling us very quickly to say, I'm thinking about this, what you, and in the relationship building and rapport, I think some things just generally come up rather than relying so much on our processes and our, just that it's the relationship building, understanding the business, their pains, what's on their mind. One of the questions I would ask sometimes, what's on your mind? What just, and it doesn't have to be my list of da da da. And then from there, we just start tapping into what's important for them for that week or month.
And you mentioned professional courage. What role does professional courage play in business partnering? Because business partnering isn't you're just there to serve, and whatever request is made, you just fulfill it perfectly. It's much more than that, isn't it? What role does professional courage play?
It plays a hugely important role in helping challenge the status quo. It means that you're also intentionally using yourself in a way that is likely to give you the best results. So it means you're also putting a demand on your own professionalism. And especially in a domain like people and OD, we want to serve as, in some ways, the conscience of the organization. We want to also be, we want to be leading in people, we want to be leading and showing how good or how people management should look like. We should be the example. So I think that helps us to shine that through our own practice, because then role modeling then comes in, then people see, they go, oh, okay. Without you even teaching people or saying, or teaching a manager, they can see you doing it. And then that helps, it helps mitigate against risk, because what happens if a people and OD partner isn't able to challenge in a safe space or have professional courage to say, oh, by the way, have you thought about this? What does this mean? Then it means that if no, then there's a lot of risk. There's people risk, there's litigation risk, and we will not be serving well. And I do say now that the CIPD professional map is, is not very clear what you should be doing as a partner, then it means we're responsible. my old boss, previous boss used to say, if a consultant or a nurse was negligent, you would see very quickly the impact of that. They would be referred to GMC or to wherever. But when professionals are negligent or don't display professional courage, what happens? Because no one really sees the immediate impact, but it doesn't mean that there's not an impact. So, and I think professional courage really helps to if you like, improve effectiveness, but reduce risk, reduce harm, and helps build a good culture and helps improve the capability of an organization.
Yeah, it's interesting. We had Steve Hearsom on the other day, and he was saying, talking around sort of professional courage, and he was sort of saying, what's good for the organization is not necessarily good for your career in the short term. So sometimes you are into places where you might be feeding back things that people don't necessarily want to hear, or challenging them when they just, all the biases are kicking in and like, look, overconfidence bias, and yours pointing it out. Actually, do you know what? Have you considered this bit? Is that something that we just have to overcome as a profession?
I think we have to, it's not, I mean, being professionally courageous is not, I've arrived now, so I'm just going to tell you how you need to do everything and organize everything. No, there's something about tactfulness. There's something about being mindful of what's, taking time to understand why people are where they are and what journey and validating their journey. Because it's not like, I'll throw everything away. You're so, it's understanding their journey, their progress, but also helping work alongside them to say it could even be better and incrementally adding value. So it's not just, it's not dumping things on people. So I think it's balancing that. But at some point, it's also being values driven, definitely. So you've got to be thinking, what are my personal values? Are they aligned with the values of this organization? Or, of course, not immediately. I will turn up somewhere and we may not always agree on all our values, but is there some alignment somewhere? And then at some point, if you really feel they're really at odds, part of professional courage is to say, actually, I've done my best here. Is this the best environment for me? And take decisions that are much more, that you have control over rather than other people.
Really, really great advice, I think, for people. We often say to HR people, you can do a lot by asking really good coaching questions of your senior leaders. So you don't need to, as you say, you don't need to go in like a bull in a china shop and beat them over the head. Just gentle, kind of smart questions can just help people get a new perspective and rethink things.
What's some of the biggest lessons you've learned along the way?
Along the way, along my HR way.
Yeah, or if you can go broader, you're very welcome. It's your space. All lessons are good. This is one of our favorite questions of these podcasts.
Yeah. One of my big ones is to not create a new problem while trying to solve an existing one.
That's genius.
And those who know me very well in my HR space, they would have heard me say that at least once. I always say it all the time. And that's because, and I've seen it in many contexts, whether you're dealing with a change of values or trying to change your systems or trying to sort an employee relations issue, whatever it is, I've noticed over time that most times there's a real drive or appetite to solve a problem like right now here. And then because we're not thinking about it properly, we're then all we're doing is just introducing another new problem. So one of the questions I would ask my leaders or people I'm working with is this solution likely to create a new problem? And if it is, then maybe it's not the full solution. It might be a temporary. It doesn't mean we can't still introduce it, but at least then we're aware of all the limitations and start to work towards. So that's one of my learnings, to not create a new problem while trying to solve one. And I'm always questioning when people bring a solution like that, because I'm looking at it from that perspective. The other thing I've learned along the way is that people are fascinating. And just, even though I know that, but every day I'm just really fascinated by people and that people really do evolve. So don't cling to outdated views of people or systems or things. And therefore, what that does is it makes me curious every day to see, okay, what is today saying? Yes, I can use all the past as a, using it as a like a rear view mirror to see what's in the past, but not cling to it, because and that goes again with lots of the advice that HR departments or these people prefer, the solutions we prefer. If we keep clinging to outdated views and opinions, things have moved on so quickly, so dynamic. We almost need to look at what's in front of us right now as well. I think those would be the two things.
Fabulous. Okay, and just as we wrap up, so learning and development is really important for people in our, well, for everybody, but particularly people, I think, in our space. How do you invest in your own learning and development? What does that look like for you?
Really good question. What does that look like for me? It looks like me thinking every quarter about what I'm learning and planning ahead. So I do that through goal setting or goal planning. So every year I have 1 or 2 big things I want to achieve in my career. And then I do have mentors. I also do have coaching. I also do a lot of peer-to-peer coaching, because even as a chief people officer, you just don't know everything. You're still, sometimes, just because you haven't been doing something for a long time or very hands-on. So I do have a group of people that I would call and say, oh, let's bounce ideas. What do you think about this? I love reading. I read a lot. Showing curiosity and learning from everything and everyone. I come into every day thinking, what can I learn this day? What's that 1 or 2 things I didn't know before that I can pick up? Whether that's reading a Harvard Business Review or looking at Garin's LinkedIn post and success to the successful. Just picking up learning as I go along, not just both structured, but from exposure, and just setting goals, and reading and talking to people, finding out about what they're doing.
It's really interesting because reading has come up quite a lot, and not necessarily just reading around your own subjects, but broader reading can really help, can't it, in terms of your own development? Is that something that you look to do?
I do, yes. Unfortunately, I've got many books that are like both on Audible and paper and by my bedside, and I'm just like, okay, pick one. But yeah, I do. What I do is I do go from, okay, what's interesting me right now, or what's topical, and then I might start reading into that, and then and I do read lots of my therapy stuff as well, which sometimes they cut across leadership. Yeah, I do like reading about new things and suggestions. People tell me, oh, here's a suggestion, and I like to read just for reading's sake, just to relax as well. So novel.
You're in that team, Danny, aren't you?
I am. Yeah, I love books. You can see behind me. Stacks of them everywhere.
Brilliant. And then last question, what we really want to do is inspire the next generation of organisation development practitioners to come through, whether they're internal, external, whether they're interim, whether they're organisation development consultant by name and title, or whether they just do their work in an OD way. What advice would you give someone who's considering either a career or just getting started to really gain confidence to apply themselves in this way?
I think they should take a longer view of their learning, or longer term view, because otherwise I find sometimes when people are coming into people an OD, or depending on how it's called in the organization, sometimes it's very much about, I need to be at this place by next year, and then 2 years time, very linear. I would say think about it not from a linear perspective, but from a circular model. That's the way, because lots of things come back in a circular model. Whether you're, even if you start as a HR assistant and become a chief people officer, you're never going to stop still knowing about employee relations or management, or it just comes back in a different package. So I'd say take a longer term view and broaden that people think about broadening their knowledge and having depth. I think sometimes people underestimate the people and OD function, as they think is, yes, it's a very rewarding and financially rewarding career, really great. I took it because, or I went on this path because I thought, actually all organizations, at least over 200 or maybe 100, will have a HR department in one form or another. So it's very dynamic, and if you like, you're always going to have a job, which is, it's a great profession. But it's beyond that. It's a profession that really adds value to people's lives, and it has impact. So again, if you're thinking of something much more rewarding and purposeful, it could do that. But taking a longer term view and learning to add value, not just learning to gain. That I think that comes out of it. And that's not to stop people from being driven. You can be driven, but keep thinking of the value that it's having, but also to embed OD thinking into what one is doing. That's where if you like, that's where the magic really happens with every other thing. So I would say it serves well when one has that thinking, that OD. And because the world has changed now, what people want from work has changed from what people wanted 20, 30 years ago. People are wanting more meaning from coming to work. And I think OD practitioners can help in that space, to help make meaningful environments for employees and organizations.
Amazing. Wow. So it's been such a really enjoyable conversation. Just the way you've articulated, I'm taking loads of things from today's conversation. I'm sure you are, Danny, as well. There's a lot of things I've picked up from this. Is it okay if I share them? So the importance of professional courage, that was kind of woven throughout it. Sustainable change takes time, expectations around it, the importance of contracting before you beginning. Good work happens when you've created the opportunity to plan ahead. The importance of supervision, business partnering at the level you're at. So not just leaving it to the people with the title business partner, but if you're in that senior HR role, then see that you're business partnering and really understanding your stakeholders, what brings them there, what motivates them, and that as well. Serving as the conscience of the organization, the importance of role modeling, importance of adding value and being values driven. And the one I'm really going to definitely take away is don't create another problem when trying to solve your current one. That is wisdom, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Take it away.
Yes, so much. I'd echo a lot of what you said. I think I won't repeat it, but I think the other thing was just how we are as people practitioners and OD practitioners, really role models for others, how they can behave and be. So yeah, the importance of our impact as a practitioner.
It's so good to know there's people like you out in the field doing great work, and not only doing great work in your organization, but inspiring the next generation to come through as well. So thank you for being so generous with your time and giving it so freely. And we really, really appreciate it. If anybody has any questions, can people reach out to you, and what would be a good way to do that?
Yeah, they can. My LinkedIn is now linked with my work. So if people reached out, I'd easily see it. So yeah, they can reach out on LinkedIn.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time. And yeah, brilliant. Thank you. It's been really enjoyable. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. It's been lovely talking to you guys. I've enjoyed it too.
Yeah, likewise. We've really enjoyed it. It's been a fantastic conversation.